Peter Pan in Disney's Return to Neverland. Once upon a time, a girl named Wendy met a magical boy named Peter Pan. He took her to a wondrous place called Neverland, where no one ever grows up. When Wendy returned home, she promised, "I'll always believe in you, Peter Pan." Years passed, Wendy grew up, but she never forgot her promise. Every night, Wendy told her two children stories about Peter Pan, the Lost Boys, and tiny fairy named Tinkerbell. Wendy's daughter, a serious 12-year-old named Jane, had no use for make-believe. But her brother Danny loved hearing the stories again and again, especially the one about Captain Hook and the treasure. Captain Hook and his men stole treasure from other ships. They kept their loot on their ship and the Jolly Roger. Peter and Hook had a long, fierce sword fight. Eventually, Peter and the boys escaped with the treasure. Then Tinkerbell showered the pirate ship with pixie dust, which made the Jolly Roger float off into the sky. "You've not seen the end of me, Peter Pan. I'll get you for this if it's the last thing I do," Captain Hook shouted as he drifted away. "Hook will never win as long as there is faith, trust, and pixie dust," Wendy said, and she ended her story for the night. Danny was delighted, but not Jane. She thought it was all just childish nonsense. "Peter Pan isn't real, and people don't fly." "They do too," cried Danny. "Oh, Daniel, grow up," Jane said and went into her room. Jane lay down on her seat next to the window. After a while, she fell asleep. While she slept, something strange happened in the sky outside. A surprise visitor appeared. It was someone she never ever expected to see. Jane awoke to see Captain Hook standing next to her bed. "Hello, Wendy," Hook said wickedly, thinking Jane was her mother. Before Jane could explain, Captain Hook ordered her first mate, Mr. Smee, to put her into a big sack. "My apologies, miss," Smee said as he tied the sack. Hook and Smee took Jane aboard the Jolly Roger and headed back to Neverland. Hook had a plan to trap Peter Pan once and for all. "With Wendy as bait, we shall lure Peter Pan to his doom," Hook bragged to Smee. As luck would have it, just as the pirate ship arrived in Neverland, Peter Pan and Tinkerbell appeared. Hook's men fired a cannonball at Peter. Of course they missed, so Hook pointed to the hanging sack. He boasted that he had captured Wendy and planned to feed her to the octopus that lurked in the water below. "Let her go, you black-hearted scoundrel," commanded Peter as he took Hook began a sword fight. "You want her? Ha! We'll go and get her," Hook shouted. Captain Hook raised his sword and cut the rope holding the sack. To Peter's horror, the sack dropped into the water. Bravely, Peter dived into the water to save his friend. Tinkerbell followed close behind. Peter might need her help. Captain Hook and the pirates peered eagerly over the side of the ship. After a short while, Peter's hat bobbed up to the surface. Minutes later, when Peter didn't appear, Captain Hook shouted triumphantly, "I did it! I did it! I'm free, free of Peter Pan forever." But Hook's cheering was cut short. Out of the water rose Peter Pan and Tinkerbell. Peter flew away from the sack, flew away with the sack in his arms. Tinker Bell sprinkled pixie dust onto the giant octopus, causing it to rise high above the Jolly Roger. Then Tinker Bell abruptly stopped sprinkling pixie dust. The octopus landed on top of the Captain Hook with a loud crash. "Hook!" yelled as the beast started to pull him over the side of the boat. The hungry octopus was very happy to have caught a Captain Hook dinner. But the captain wasn't so happy about being dinner. "Snee!" Hook yelled. Snee grabbed Captain Hook's hand. Snee and the octopus pulled and pulled in the opposite direction. Finally, with a mighty yank, Snee reached the captain out of the octopus's arms. The two pirates flew through the air and fell into the cargo hold. Smee had saved Hook, but the captain wasn't the least bit grateful. "Mr. Snee, be a good fellow and fix the plank, please," Hook growled, "so I can make you walk it." Meanwhile, Peter and Tinker Bell flew to safety. Peter gently placed the sack on the ground and began to unite it. He couldn't wait to see his old friend Wendy. But when Peter opened the sack, pow! Thinking she was still a prisoner of the pirates, Jane had loosened a terrific punch. "Ow! You're sure not Wendy," Peter said, rubbing his jaw. Just then Hook fired a cannonball at them. Peter flew off and Jane in his arms. "If you're not Wendy, who are you?" Peter asked. "I'm her daughter, Jane," the girl replied. As they flew over Neverland, Jane was amazed at all the sights below her. Suddenly, Peter stopped flying and dropped Jane into a hollow tree trunk. She slid down a very long chute. Jane landed at the bottom of the underground tree house where Peter lived with the Lost Boys. Nib Slightly, the twins, Chubby and Toodles, dropped down from the ceiling to greet her. "This is Jane," Peter told the boys. "She's going to stay here and be our new mother and tell us stories." The Lost Boys gathered around Jane excitedly, but Tinker Bell wasn't so pleased. She wanted Jane to go home. Tinker Bell didn't want to share Peter Pan's attention. "Let's play a game," said Nibs. "How about treasure hunt?" Peter suggested, but Jane didn't want to play. No, Jane shouted. "I have to go home," Jane told them and stomped off. "What's the matter with her?" asked Cubby. Peter scratched his chin and thought hard. "I don't know," he said. "She acts kind of like a grown-up." "Ew," said the Lost Boys. Peter followed Jane and soon found her building a raft so that she could sail home. He watched as Jane pushed off raft into the water and jumped aboard, but she didn't get very far. Almost immediately, the raft began to break up and sink. Jane fell into the water with a big splash. When he saw she was in trouble, Peter flew out to save Jane. "The only way out of here is to fly," Peter explained. Then he set her down on the top of the ledge. "Anybody can do it," Peter assured her. All it took was faith, trust, and pixie dust. But Jane refused to believe she could fly. So Tinker Bell sprinkled some pixie dust on the Lost Boys, and they glided in the air around her to show her how it worked. Then Peter asked Tinker Bell to sprinkle Jane with pixie dust too, but Tinker Bell didn't want to do anything to help Jane. She thought that Peter liked Jane too much. Peter knew just how to persuade Tinker Bell. "Gosh, if Jane can't fly home, I guess she'll have to move in with us," he whispered to Tiny Fairy. Tinker Bell didn't like that idea at all, so she sprinkled Jane with lots and lots of pixie dust. But all the dust just made Jane sneeze. Now Peter was sure that Jane could fly, so he nudged her off the ledge, but Jane didn't have the faith and trust that she needed to fly. "Ah!" Jane cried as she fell. The Lost Boys tried to catch her, but they missed. Jane landed in the soft ground with a thud. Jane was terribly angry and upset. "Leave me alone," she cried. "I don't believe in any of this, and I especially don't believe in fairies." As Jane stormed away, Tinker Bell began falling towards the ground. She could no longer fly, and her light was fading. Peter knelt down to help Tinker Bell hear what she was saying. A worried Peter told the Lost Boys, "If we don't get Jane to believe in fairies, Tink's light is going to go out." The group sped off to find Jane. Meanwhile, Jane came upon Captain Hook, who was weeping miserably. He told her that Peter Pan had stolen his treasure, but Hook needed to sail home to his mother. Captain Hook promised to take Jane home if she helped find him his treasure. Jane agreed, and he gave a whistle to the signal when she found the treasure. Jane didn't know, but she had been tricked into Captain Hook's plan and captured Peter Pan. Soon Jane met up with Peter and the Lost Boys. "Jane, I'm awful sorry," Peter said. "We want to do something to make it up to you. We want you to feel like you're one of us." "Well," Jane said, "why don't we play treasure hunt?" "That's a great idea," said Peter, "but you'll have to think like a lost boy and have fun like a lost boy." Jane couldn't remember the last time she had so much fun. Eventually, Jane discovered the treasure. Then she remembered Hook's whistle. Jane realized that she didn't want to betray her new friends, so she threw the whistle away. Unfortunately, Toodles saw the shiny whistle, picked it up, and blew it loudly. "No, wait, no!" Jane cried out, but it was too late. Captain Hook and the pirates heard the whistle, and in no time captured Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. Hook thanked Jane. "I couldn't have done it without you," he told her. "You're a traitor, Jane," Peter shouted angrily. "And because you don't believe in fairies, Tink's light is going out." Hook took Peter and the Lost Boys back in his ship. This time he wasn't going to let Peter get away. Jane needed Tinker Bell's help, but she found the tiny fairy very weak. Jane started to cry. "I'm so sorry," she said, because she did believe in fairies. Then something magical happened. Tinker Bell's light started to flicker. Soon the fairy's light was shining brighter than ever before. Jane and Tinker Bell arrived in the Jolly Roger just in the nick of time. They easily outwitted Hook, especially when Tinker Bell sprinkled Jane with pixie dust and Jane flew away before Hook could capture her. Then, just after Jane freed Peter, Hook made another attempt to grab her. "Gotcha," Hook bellowed as he swung on a rope towards her. But Peter swiftly grabbed his dagger and cut the rope. Hook fell into the water and onto the octopus. "Snee!" yelled Hook as he tried to escape. "Let's hear it for Jane, the one and only lost girl," the Lost Boys shouted. Peter looked sad. "You can fly now. You can go home," he told Jane. "I'll miss you," Jane admitted. "But now I have great stories to tell, all about Peter Pan and the Lost Boys." So Peter Pan, Tinker Bell, and Jane flew back to Jane's home in London. At home, Jane and her family were very happy to be united. Jane told her mother and Danny about her adventures in Neverland, about pirates and treasures, the giant octopus, Tinker Bell, and especially Peter Pan. Peter saw his old friend Wendy was now all grown up. "You've changed," he told her. "Not really. Not ever," Wendy answered. Wendy would always believe in Peter Pan, and now Jane would too. The end.